Ryan Parkhurst, who's here from Reliance Health. We have Matt Liscombe and Kathleen Gray. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me. Just a little bit of history. I took classes at this college when it was Mohegan Community College. So from what I can recall, it was a wonderful experience. And it's amazing how this college has grown. So Reliance Health. Some people may not recognize the name, some people may. We were Reliance House up until 2 years ago, which our 40th anniversary, we rebranded, and we came up with Reliance Health. We are a nonprofit agency that provides services to individuals in the community that suffer from mental illness. Everything from anxiety disorders, depression, schizophrenia, a lot of the stuff that the keynote speaker Amanda was talking about this morning. She's one of our clinicians at Reliance Health. The mission criteria is we're kind of restricted a little bit because of our funding. We're funded through the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, DMHIS. So at this time, we provide services to folks that have Medicare, Medicaid, or no insurance at this point. We recently, through our latest accreditation, have been given the go-ahead to apply to private insurance companies, so we can now start billing Anthem, United, Cigna, all those other insurance companies, which will open up services to a lot of people. Reliance Health, on an average year, we probably provide services to a little less than 1,000 people in the community. Not all at the same time, but that's a lot of people. While we do serve that many people, we also have waiting lists for the majority of our programs, which goes to show the need that there is in the community for services. The programs that I oversee our supported education program and our supported employment programs. Our supported education program is a program that has a 30-person capacity. Right now we are at 29 people. So what do we do within that program? So we service folks. Our youngest member, I believe, is 19, and then we have another gentleman that's in his early 60s. And he'll be attending Eastern in the fall. He's graduating from here in the spring. He'll be going to Eastern in the fall. So not everybody out of those 29 people is enrolled in a college or university at this time. Some people are kind of in that contemplative state where they know they want to go and continue their education, but they're just not sure what they want to do with it. So we meet folks where they're at. So if they're not ready to enroll, what else can we be doing that's education related with them? There's a lot of online stuff that we do with them, to sharpen up their math skills, typing skills, even basic stuff like writing emails and sending emails, just starting off with the small stuff. And then once as they grow and they kind of figure out what their goal is, then that it's their goal. We don't tell them what their goal is. We work with them on their goals. We help them meet with Matt and Kathy and on accommodations. We strongly encourage folks to get those accommodations in place. Sometimes folks will feel like they don't need the accommodations. I got this, I don't need the accommodations. Well, how about we get them put in place? And if you use them, you use them. If you don't, that's fine too. But getting them put in place is a big part of it. We provide some basic tutoring stuff. Your tutoring centers are wonderful, but they're also very busy. So we try to do a little bit of tutoring on the side too. That's kind of what we do. I threw pamphlets on tables. There's more information in those. If you have students that you feel are in need of more services on the mental health front, feel free to call us. Feel free to call the agency. You can call me directly. We'll be happy to try to provide some guidance. It's a challenge at times, but you guys are doing some great work. The one thing I did hear mentioned more than once in this group was trying to build that relationship with folks. That's a huge part of it, you know, and you're not gonna build that great relationship with everybody. It's not realistic. But listening to people, trying to make that connection with them, being real, and folks will tend to open up to you more and build that relationship.
Is that it? I can vouch for the efforts of the Reliance Health individuals and what they do for our students. They're great advocates, and they do not interfere or impose their thoughts, beliefs, or will upon the students. They're really a true support system, so it's really good work. Good work. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we do here in regards, I mean, many of you know in terms of disabilities or counseling services, but I think a couple things that I want to highlight is we're all aware of the campaign, if you see something, say something, with packages or book bags or whatever. A lot of you, it's really what you're doing with our students right now, and you do a really good job. Many of you discover a lot of things about our students long before any of us will ever discover. So, and I know there's always that reluctance to say something to a student, but if we follow that campaign of you see something, say something, you really, if your intent is good, which in 99.9% of the time it is, you can pretty much do and say whatever you want to a student, or say to a student. Speaking of, Dan's still here, I don't know if the other students are, but I think they did a great job. And that gives you all a little window of what my day-to-day existence is. I get to sit there and hear the stories of these wonderful individuals, and a lot of them you guys have spotted and taken the time to say something. And I go back to the video that was shown earlier from the individual that actually jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge. He actually was here, I think maybe 3 years ago, maybe Rhonda brought him here. And he said in this room, something I'll never forget, that he took public transportation to get to the bridge. And he was crying. And he said, if just one person would have said to me, "Are you okay? Do you need something? Are you all right?" he would not have attempted suicide. He made that agreement with himself. If anyone reaches out, he would not do it. So you recognizing something happening, and if your intent, it's a big issue for me, or a big word in the sense that if your intent is to be helpful and beneficial to anyone about anything, it's really hard for you to be in any way, shape, or form harmful or do anything negative to a person. If the worst thing you do is insult someone, the recovery rate is 100%. So go ahead and do it. I think you should feel free to do that if your intent is good, which it is. You care. You want to help them in some capacity, in some way. So intent means a lot. It's also a safety or a location for you to anchor yourself to if you feel like the situation, like if you've offended someone or if you feel like they're unhappy, you can just say to them, "Well, I was just concerned about you." So if you go back to the intent, you actually can help the conversation. So that was a kind of a long-winded way of just kind of going about. I guess I really have to acknowledge the work that you guys do as faculty and fellow staff, in the sense that you do bring a lot of students down to the A-Wing to see Kathleen, Deirdre, or I, and it's very beneficial in a lot of ways to the students that none of us are really long-term aware of. That none of us get to see the true fruits of those efforts because they do well. But what I really respect is that I've never had a faculty or staff person get nosy about it. You guys are really good about the boundaries, about respecting or trusting the follow-ups are going to be handled correctly. You don't overstep. And I think it's a great thing. It makes the job easier, more enjoyable when that happens. So I'm going to hand it over to Kathleen Gray.
Yeah, I have hope for our generations coming up. A few years back, my son started middle school, and he'd come home every day telling me about his different friends and things going on. And he kept talking about this one friend, and he liked my joke. Oh, he liked my game that I worked. He liked mine. And I finally, after a week or two, said to my son, wow, like, don't you ever ask your friend what he's interested in or what he likes? He says, Mom, he's autistic. He doesn't speak, but I know he likes my jokes because he laughs and he makes nods. And it's just, again, he didn't come home from school saying, oh, I met this weird kid who had autism. It was another friend that he had met. And to me, that's, our generations are growing up to see differences. And so we have to get more comfortable with differences. And so that's what I love about my job, is everyone is so different that I see. And Matt is correct. Faculty are wonderful about reaching out. I have this student who looks depressed, looks a little disheveled. What do I do? What can I say? How can I bring them to you? A phone call, a walk down the hallway. That's what we're there for. So the counselors that are in A119, we're here to provide support. We are not long-term therapists, we are short-term therapists. We all have master's level training. So we will do short-term counseling and support and interventions with students. So when students come in, they may already have a counselor or a therapist that they just haven't connected with. Maybe they've stopped medication. And a lot of times we do see the anxiety, we see the panic, we see the depression, the suicidal thoughts. But when they know they can connect with us, and we can connect them back into the community, back to their family, back to the support people, knowing their faculty even brought up, said, hey, your faculty said they want to help you. Again, that trigger of someone cares about me. Someone out there at Three Rivers really noticed me and knows I want some support and I want to do better. So bringing them into the counseling office, like I said, we can do some short-term supports. We can also do crisis intervention. So I get a lot of phone calls. I've got a student crying in the bathroom. I don't know what to do. Matt, Deirdre, or I would head down there. I've had this happen.
I don't go in the women's room.
So we'll head over and we'll intervene. We'll check in with that student. What's going on? Do they want to come to our office? Many times I've had lunch and I sit outside sometimes in my car and I'll see a student crying and I get out there and talk to them and bring them back to my office. We'll see students in rages. I've walked down the hallway and had a student and a faculty member screaming at each other. So again, to get in there and intervene, what's going on? You get down to my office, you need to stop what you're doing. So that's what we're trained to do, is we're comfortable when you're not comfortable, potentially. If you've got a student that may be in your classroom, I had a faculty call me and say, I've got a student that keeps reaching into his backpack and he doesn't look at me and he just looks like he could be harmful. And again, they weren't comfortable sharing the name. So again, I went to the classroom. She pointed out who the student was. I just engaged him in the hallway. Hey, how you doing? Your first semester, second semester? And again, brought him back to my office. He was very engaging. He was very open what his issues were with me. And I called that faculty later in the day and said, hey, that student is fine. He's got adjustments in place. He's doing what he needs to do to be able to get through your class. And again, it was that reassurance. He was not dangerous. He wasn't carrying any weapons in his, because again, those are the questions I will ask. So we can assess that situation. Are they suicidal? Are they going to be dangerous to you or to others people? And if they are, we will call security. We will get support from suicide hotlines. We will talk to their therapists. So we will provide the supports. So the message today too, I think, is you're not alone. I know you feel alone when you're in your office, or maybe you've got one student, but you're not alone. We are here to provide that support. And so don't hesitate to contact us. Matt, surprisingly, gives great advice. Like at times, it's fantastic advice. And again, many of us are very willing to help your students and help you guide them in the classroom or guide them in the direction you need. So thank you for being here today. Thank you for your attention too. So I'm sure you guys have lots more questions, so we're ready.
Sorry. So just one of the things, don't be afraid to ask a question. You know, you can't emphasize that enough. Ask the question, are you okay? Are you safe? Oh, man. Right? And the worst thing that's going to happen is somebody's going to get mad at you. But like Matt said, the recovery rate's 100%. You know, you would rather ask that question than go home at the end of the day thinking, shouldn't I have asked, and wondering. Right? You want that peace of mind. And also, like Kathleen was saying, don't feel like you're it. You are not here to solve all the problems. You know, just by listening, you know, and showing empathy, you know, that's part of the solution. That's part of helping folks.
And before the questions come, we also have Christine Lanketh updates this faculty and staff guide for assisting students in need. So it's a wonderful little support booklet. Has a lot of phone numbers right in the back that you can utilize. Sharon Lincoln wonderfully put this community resource booklet together. Again, I think there's some copies on your table, but she also has a whole box of them in her office. And she also designed it, I'll have you know. So if you go, oh my gosh, my student has addiction, substance abuse, are there any resources out there? You can copy them, give them to the student, and have them right available to you. Are they homeless? Are they needing the full plate pantry? What are they needing? The resource book is here, and also it's on the website. So if you go under student services, community resources, this information is online, and Sharon is a whiz at technology and putting that stuff up there. So, and again, may not be all 100% updated because it is hard. Agencies do change numbers and stuff, but we do try to keep that updated for you, so you will have that support as well.
Yeah, on the tables, there's some resources. There's some quick connects that were just updated. The sides did that through, so we have these. There's other resources at your table. Strategically, we don't have copies of this for everybody.
Sharon's got a box in her
Okay, and I was thinking some could go into like the faculty, staff places, what places that you can get them. But if you want copies of anything that's on the table, just let us know.
And also 211 is also a great resource that's out there. If folks have questions about some of the stuff that might not be answered in the reference guides, 211 is a great resource. They'll provide you with a lot of direction and information.
So questions, you had lots that we sort of deferred to this part of the day.
I'd like to preface this by saying I agree with and practice much of what's been talked about today. This is going to be a little bit of a buzzkill, so I have to enjoy a moment. On occasion, we have individuals show up at the college that are sucking maws of need for whatever reason, and they would prefer us function as 24/7 life coaches for years and years, for very extended periods of time. These individuals disproportionately take a large amount of our limited resources, which is pretty much disallowing access to other individuals. So my question is, as an institution, at what point do we say no?
I'll address that from a disability standpoint, I think. Purely from a disability standpoint, it's what the college deems reasonable. And that's, the best thing we can do with that is be consistent. It is disproportionate, I can't speak, disproportionate, there we go, I think. But it is, from a disability standpoint, the student has come with a lot of documentation and has put themselves in this position, hopefully to be successful, and then we have to render a decision as to whether what they're seeking or asking for is reasonable. So we try to limit what you just described from the standpoint of utilizing the disability to do that. Beyond that, I think that it's something that has to be addressed or looked at with regards to the fact that you are educating 30 plus students in most cases in a classroom and not just one. So it should not be disproportionate to the point that it's detrimental.
Not for any individual at the college, but they're utilizing many individuals at the college and other resources. So not just like one instructor or something like that.
Right. Yeah, no, I can think of some cases where that's happened. We try to handle that the best that we can. I mean, we have met about certain students in Christine's office to kind of come up with a strategy that serves the student fairly and protects the limitations of our resources. But it's certainly not precise, and it's something that there's always going to be that problem before there's that solution.
Like Matt said, in a case like that, we have folks within our program that are constantly trying to get more and more and more and more. And the thing that we practice is just setting very tight and very consistent boundaries. This is what we can offer to you, and this is how long I can offer it to you. So if your appointment is for an hour, we're gonna let you know right off the bat, your appointment is for an hour. I have other people to see after you, so we cannot allow them to dictate how we operate per se. You know, this is our plan in place. This is how we do it, why we do it. And so people are gonna push back on it, you know, and they're gonna try to, you know, pull more out of us. But by just maintaining those parameters and those boundaries, eventually we've seen with most folks that, you know, it does kind of turn and start going the other way, where they're aware of what they're entitled to and not entitled to.
As we go forward, I see that I wonder, because it can be a slippery slope, because for people, we're trying to be empathetic to our students, and yet we have rules as far as accommodations. They have to go through you folks. We have to get a letter. We could get ourselves in trouble when we try to bend over too much, that we're doing that for this student, as somebody said, spending a whole lot of time, or making accommodations that we really shouldn't, because there hasn't been a diagnosis of a disability. And so if somebody comes in and they're obviously have some issues, unless they go through you, we should not be making diagnoses that they need accommodations without you folks being involved. Is that correct? That's what I just...
100%.
Okay, and on the other side, when does it fall under the legal rules that we have to report certain issues? I assume it's just when we get information or an inkling that there has been some sort of abuse, either emotional or physical, then we have to fall back into the required reporting rules?
Mandated reporting.
Yeah, mandated reporting, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Can I just, because I want to clarify, I make adaptations in my classroom all the time, not necessarily do I feel that I do have to go through the A-wing. I'll just say that. In terms of certain accommodations, again, those would be the ones that I would be open to do with with every student per se. So just to clarify, I think not every accommodation legally has to go through. So just to...
Right, the key word you said is you would offer it to anyone and everyone. So there is no bias, there is no way that you're giving one student an advantage over another in any way, shape, or form. I think what you were saying, though, is in regards to, if they mention that they have a disability and they want X, Y, or Z, they need to go through the proper channels. I mean, I can't even do anything with them until they've disclosed. So even I have limitations about that as well. So once they've done the disclosure, and then they're following the proper channel, and then we make adjustments based on what's reasonable. And those, if you follow those consistently and fairly, then there should be no issues. And I've been pretty lucky. I feel fortunate in the sense that, in talking to the colleagues that work with students with disabilities and the implementation of adjustments, they have a lot of issues and problems with their faculty. And you guys do a great job of just following the adjustments as they are, and that limits liability, and also it helps our student.
I just wanted to say that these things happen in the online environment too. I had a student a few years back who had significant challenges, I think. She never divulge a diagnosis, but there was, I would say, some pretty significant paranoia going on, and it got very disruptive in the online environment. And I just instinctively, at some point, instead of trying to go back and forth with her, I picked up the phone and I called her, and I did that a few times to diffuse situations, and I found that very helpful. And I think she appreciated me reaching out, and I don't know if I said at one point, "Are you okay?" but perhaps that along those lines. And at some point I had to refer her, to the A-wing. But these things happen online, and more people are teaching online, so just don't assume that, they're not happening there as well.
I'm going to just follow that up with again, that's the idea of what I mentioned about with intent. Todd did that with the intention of solving the situation. I have a hard time believing that there would ever be any ramifications on having good intent. So I think you should feel more free to say something. If you see something or if you experience or feel something that's askew in any way, especially if it's interfering with the learning process. I just want to talk about that a little bit in regards to comments that were made earlier about grades and the anxiety that's associated with them. As I tell students in my class, I'm going up against a decade plus of conditioning here that grades are important. And I wish we would start talking about learning being important and value, put an emphasis on don't worry about the grade, worry about what you learned. Because I know students that I've had in my class who earned a C, but learned more than someone who earned an A. So if we could flip that, switch that, to a focus on learning and less so on a GPA or a grade, I think it would help us.
That's a great point, and that's something that does need to happen, and it needs to start well before they get to this point in their education. I have a daughter that's a junior in high school, and I can remember ever since grammar school, where just the importance that it's just placing, you have to get A's, you have to get A's, you have to get A's. You know, it's something that needs to start well before they get to this point in their education.
Other questions, thoughts?
Just a quick one. Is there an assessment done anywhere in the withdrawal process to determine whether or not it's just a simple W, or this person is at risk of dropping out of the institution?
I know that they're in the process, I think Meg mentioned, or Christine mentioned in one of our last meetings, that they're going to start doing a more thorough evaluation on withdrawals. When they do complete the withdrawal slip, there is a menu there that they can identify their reasons for. So we do have some of that information, just I don't think we've done enough to capture it or to utilize it to address potential ways that we could minimize withdrawals.
And we encourage students to talk to their advisor, obviously the faculty in class, but to talk to their advisor. So hopefully that could happen through that process as well, to identify those factors that were barriers for them completing the class before they withdraw.
Well, what triggered me for this question today is, I didn't think about it before, student comes in and wants to withdraw. I never think, wait, this guy's dropping out, not just withdrawing. I never go through that process.
A lot of students are almost afraid to ask their faculty how they're doing if they don't know how they're doing. They may not have the confidence to do that. If they've been procrastinating or they've fallen behind, a lot of times they feel the only thing they can do is to withdraw. Oftentimes that manifests itself even earlier and they just stop coming. It's not that the faculty intimidate them, it's just part of that transition to college. And so I think to the extent that it's possible, if faculty can reach out to them and introduce or initiate that conversation, or if they come and start talking about withdrawing, or if they've started withdrawing, literally, if you can reach out to them a little bit, it could help them. Because what we say in advising is, we always ask them, have you spoken with your faculty about this? Because we don't want them to withdraw prematurely. And we do have students withdrawing who are doing perfectly fine, but they don't realize that or they don't feel like that. I think it's difficult. And then there's plenty of cases where they need to withdraw instead of get an F. But I just wanted to say that.
Matt, I was wondering if you could address conduct and disabilities.
Yeah, there's really no separation between disability, non-disability, and conduct. The expectation for a student in the classroom, regardless of the disability or not, is that they're not going to be a deterrent in any way to the educational process or be a distraction in any way. So they're not exempt, excuse me, they're not exempt from appropriate conduct on campus, regardless of what their disability might be. So essentially, we don't forgive them for anything because of a disability, and quite frankly, we don't allow them to not perform academically to the expectations So it's not just, it's behavioral as well, but it's all, I mean, it's not just behavioral, it's also their ability to be successful academically. We still have to hold the standard. There is no adjustment of curriculum for the purposes of their success, which is a high school model. In college, we retain that curriculum or that standard for their learning goals and objectives. And again, it's about learning, not about the grade. But did that answer the question, Crystal?
Yes, thank you.
Hi, thank you. I have a question, and this has happened a couple of times. Both the students were autistic in my classroom, and they weren't disruptive. They were doing the work, but one student had to incessantly scribble the whole time, and I think this student had to do it to kind of stay focused, but he was sharpening pencils and scribbling the whole time. And the other student would have to get up and walk to the back of the room. And I didn't quite know what to do because I didn't know if they were disruptive to the other students. But I understood why they needed to do that. And what would you recommend in a case like that?
If you felt that it was disruptive, obviously you would talk to them or ask them to come see me with that information. If it's not, if it's a situation where the rest of the class doesn't seem to be fazed by it, then I don't think there's really anything that needs to be done. There will be, and there always will be, students that behave like that in the classroom. If in any way they're interfering with anyone else's education, then it has to be addressed. And I would ask them, or I would talk to them and let me know so that I can reach out to them and have a conversation with them. I mean, I just heard it during lunch today about some issues of a student in class that it's helpful because I actually have an appointment with that student next week, so now I can speak to them about the expectations in the classroom of their behavior so that it's a fine line because you want to make sure that they can function in a way that's conducive to their success, but you don't want them to be deterrent to anyone else's ability to learn. So it's a balancing act, but ultimately they cannot impede anyone's learning or teaching in that classroom. So I would ask them to come see me.
So just to follow up on that, it was hard for me to tell if it was disturbing the other students. So, and I didn't know how to ask them, how would you, you could visibly see if it was distracting them, but it could have been. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. So I preemptively, if having had students like that in class, I tell them that that's fine, but if I hear from another student that it's an issue, I'm going to have to address it with you, and we might have to have you find a different activity while you're trying to focus, or have you move somewhere in the class, whatever the case may be.
Any other questions, follow-up?
This is just a little bit in reference to your question. I also think it's about tolerance. So in today's world, kids are used to being in classrooms with kids on the spectrum. And it happens even, I'll have an 18-year-old kid come in and say she wants to teach kids on the spectrum, and then they roll their eyes at the kid next to them who's on the spectrum. And just sort of this notion that that little 4-year-old grows up. It's my theme of the day. But I also think it's about tolerance. And you can't tell someone with a tic or if they're doing self-stim, yeah, buddy, you can't be doing that because that's part of their disability. It's like a blind person walking in and saying, but you need to see. So I do think in general we can teach kids, and I think we're going to come with students that are used to being in classrooms, and I think it's about tolerance.
I would agree. I didn't mean to make it sound like they weren't allowed to do that. Just there's a lot of alternatives that can be utilized in the classroom. But I do agree that sometimes it's really our intolerance and not the other members of the class. Because you're right, Sheila, they do grow up in a classroom where they're relatively exposed to this continuously. And we have maybe a lack of exposure to that.
Hello.
Hello, sister.
Hello, my brother.
Inside joke that's no longer an inside joke.
They didn't ask me to explain it. I just wanted to go back to talking about the withdrawal. So in the registrar's office, we do have the form, and the form does have the questions on there. Now, sometimes the students will start filling out the form and they'll skip the questions, and we say, you know, we'd like you to answer these questions. And so, you know, of course, our goal is student success, so sometimes students end up withdrawing for something that may be a reason they thought that they should. And I think some conversation talked about not checking with their instructor. We do ask you check with the instructor. We ask a question about financial aid. And sometimes you'll find that when they say, oh, no, I didn't check that. Should I do that? Or should I check financial aid? And then you find out, well, you know, we think it's a good idea. And then because they didn't think that they should, they just felt like, I feel like I'm not doing well, so I'm going to withdraw. But it hasn't been confirmed, only to find out they're passing the class. So we try to ask those questions, and also, you know, there's several boxes on there that they can check just to say, you know, what's going on with them. And if they say other and they write, sometimes we read what they write, and if it's something that shows concern, we say, you know, have you spoken to this, or we spoke to, you know, direct it to the right office or the right person, whether it's an advisor, whether it's the registrar, or someone, rather than having them just check a box and walk away, because you never know. You know, you talk to a person at the window, and then, you know, talk about that, if a lot of times we have to look at it, and you can get when someone looks sad, and if you say, are you okay? Just like we're talking about, all it takes is to say, are you okay? They may say, you know, yes, I am, no, I'm not, or, you know, you might see emotion. But it's so important to take the moment. I mean, yes, our schedules are busy, we got a lot to do, but you'll never know that, you know, 30 seconds, 60 seconds of your time could change a student's life.
That almost takes the whole day full circle, because that's really what I think that one of the strongest messages were. Any last minute? So Center for Teaching wants to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules at this busy time of year. We are going to ask you, though, before you are ready to run out the door, there is an evaluation form on the table, but we're asking this to be, again, in a more discussion format. So I'm going to ask amongst your group if you could fill one of these out. It's not individual. The idea is what were your takeaways, and give us feedback for our next events.